Hello, everybody. This is chapter 3 for today. This is March 26th. It's Thursday. So we're going to be doing this chapter 3 today as well. Again, today is going to be a Padlet question. I'm just going to answer the question. Make sure you answer it in detail. Like I said, if you can't do Padlet, you can do the Google Doc that is also attached with the focus question. Make sure it's a couple sentences. I do not want one-word answers. I do not want, not a full, complete sentence. Make sure you're doing that correctly because you won't get credit. So here is chapter 3. The Torrance Tornado. It happened every Saturday. Louis went to the track, limbered up, lay in the infield visualizing his coming race, then walked to the line, awaited the pop of the gun, and sprang away. Pete dashed around the infield, yelling instructions. When Pete gave the signal, Louis stretched out his legs and opponents scattered behind him. Louis glided over the line. Pete tackled him, and the kids in the bleachers cheered and stomped. Louis won so many wrist races, the traditional prize of track, that he handed them out all over town. Louis' supreme high school moment came in the 1934 Southern California Track and Field Championship. Running in the best field of high school milers ever assembled, he routed them all and smote the mile in 4 minutes 21 seconds, shattering the national high school record. His main pursuer so exhausted himself that he had to be carried from the track. A reporter predicted that Louis' record would stand for 20 years. It stood for 19. Once his hometown's arch-villain, Louis was now a superstar, and Torrance forgave him everything. The Los Angeles Times was stripped with stories on the Torrance tornado. Rumor had it that Torrance Herald issued Louis' legs for $50,000. Insured it. Torrance's carpooled to his races and crammed the grandstands. Embarrassed, Louis asked his parents not to come. Louise snuck to the track fence anyway, but got so nervous she covered her eyes. Not long ago, Louis' aspirations had been satisfied by robbing kitchens. Now he latched on to a wildly ambitious goal, qualifying for the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. The games had no mile race, so milers ran 1,500 meters, a little short of a mile. It was a seasoned man's game. Most milers peaked in their mid to late 20s. The 1,500-meter favorite was Glenn Cunningham, who set the mile world record, 4 minutes 6 seconds, just after Louis set the high school record. At the 36 games, Cunningham would be almost 27 and wouldn't peak until he was 28. In 1936, Louis would be only 19. But Louis was improving so quickly, he looped a staggering 42 seconds off his mile time in 2 years. Track experts thought he might be the exception to the rule, and after he went undefeated in his senior season, their confidence was strengthened. Louis and Pete believed he would make the team. Louis wanted to run in Berlin more than he had ever wanted anything. In December 1935, Louis graduated from high school, and days later rang in 1936 with his thoughts full of Berlin, 7 months away. He was buried in college scholarships offers. Pete, now at the University of Southern California, urged Louis to choose USC, but delay entry until fall so he could train. Louis moved into Pete's frat house and, with Pete coaching him, trained obsessively for Berlin. Those were his shoes at the time. By spring, he realized he wasn't going to make it. Though he was getting faster every day, he couldn't force his body to improve quickly enough to catch his 1,500-meter rivals by summer. He was simply too young. He was heartbroken. In May, Louis was leafing through a newspaper when he saw a story on the Compton Open, a prestigious track meet to be held on May 22nd. The headliner in the 15,000 meters was 26-year-old Norman Bright, America's second fastest 5,000-meter run behind Don Lash, a 23-year-old record-smashing machine. America would send 3 5,000-meter men to Berlin, and Lash and Bright were considered locks. Pete urged Louis to enter Bright's race. If you stay with Norman Bright, he said, you might make the Olympic team. The idea was a stretch. The mile was 4 laps. The 5,000 was more than 12, 3 miles and 188 yards. Louis had only twice raced beyond a mile, and the 5,000, like the mile, was dominated by much older men. He had only 2 weeks to train, and with the Olympic trials in July, 2 months to become America's youngest elite 5,000 man. But he had nothing to lose. He trained so hard, his foot bled. The race was a bar burner. Louis and and Bright flew off, leaving the field far behind. Lap after lap, they dueled, trading the lead and sending roars through the crowd. They turned into the final home stretch together, and with the crowd screaming, finished almost dead even. In the fastest 5,000 run in America in 1936, Bright had won by a glimmer. In June, after Louis performed brilliantly in 2 more 5,000s, an invitation to the Olympic trials arrived. His Berlin dream was on again. In July 3rd, 1936, residents of Torrance gathered to see Louis off to the Olympic trials in New York. They gave him a wallet and traveling money, a train ticket, and a suitcase embezzled with the words Torrance Tornado. Fearing the suitcase had made him look brash, Louis secretly stuck adhesive tape over the nickname, then set off. He spent the journey introducing himself to every pretty girl on the train. There's his suitcase. When the train doors opened in New York, Louis felt he was walking into an inferno. It was the hottest summer on record in America, and New York was especially hard hit. In 1936, air conditioning was a rarity, found only in few theaters and department stores, so escape was nearly impossible. That week, the heat would kill 3,000 Americans, 40 of them in New York, where it hit 106 degrees. In spite of the heat, Louis had to train. Sweating profusely day and night, training in the sun, unable to sleep in the heat, virtually every athlete lost a huge amount of weight. By one estimate, no athlete lost less than 10 pounds. One virtually moved into an air-conditioned theater, buying tickets to movies and sleeping through every showing. Louis was as miserable as everyone else. His weight fell perceptuously. The pre-race newspaper coverage riled him. Don Lash was considered unbeatable. Bright was pegged for second. Louis wasn't mentioned. He was daunted by Lash, but the first 3 runners would go to Berlin, and he believed he could be among them. If I have any strength left from the heat, he wrote to Pete, I'll beat Bright and give Lash the scare of his life. The trials were held at a stadium in New York's Randall's Island. It was just short of a 90 in the city, but the stadium was much hotter, probably over 100 degrees. Everywhere athletes were kneeling over and being carted to hospitals. Louis waited for his race under a scalding sun that, he later said, made a wreck of me. At last, the men were told to line up. The gun cracked and the race was on. Lash bounded to the lead with Bright in pursuit. Louis dropped back. In the Zamperini house, a throng crouched around the radio. They were in agony. Louis' start time had passed, but the announcer was lingering on the swimming trials. Pete was so frustrated he considered putting his foot through the radio. At last, the announcer listed the positions of the 5,000-meter runners. He didn't mention Louis. Overwhelmed, Louis fled to the kitchen. Lash and Bright held the runners through laps 7, 8, 9. Louis hovered mid-pack, waiting to make his move. The heat was suffocating. One runner collapsed and the others hurdled him. Another dropped and they jumped him too. Louis could feel his feet cooking on as the spikes of his shoes conducted heat up from the track. Bright's feet were burning particularly badly. In terrible pain, he took a staggering step off the track and twisted his ankle, then lurched back on. Louis passed him and he had no resistance to offer. As the runners entered the final lap, Louis accelerated, closing in on Lash. Looking at the bobbing head of the mighty Don Lash, Louis felt intimidated. For several strides he hesitated. Then he saw the last curve ahead. He opened up as fast as he could go. Banking around the return, Louis drew alongside Lash and the two ran side by side down the home stretch. Neither man had any more speed to give, and neither could get past the other. Exhausted, straining with heads thrown, back and legs moving in sync, they hit the line together. The announcer's voice echoed across the living room in Torrance. Zamperini, he said, had won. In the kitchen, Louise heard the crowd in the next room suddenly shout. Outside, car horns honked. The front door swung open and neighbors gushed in. As a crush of hysterical Torrancers celebrated around her, Louise wept happy tears. Anthony poured wine and sang out toasts. Louis' voice came over the airways, calling a greeting to Torrance. The announcer was mistaken. The judge ruled Lash the winner. The announcer corrected himself, but it hardly dimmed the rivalry in Torrance. A few minutes later, Louis stood under a cold shower. His feet were burned, the marks following the patterns of his spikes. After drying off, he weighed himself. He sweated off 3 pounds. Norman Bright was slumped on a bench, staring at his foot. It, like the other one, was burned so badly that the skin had peeled off. He'd finished 5th. By the day's end, Louis had received some 125 telegrams. Torrance has gone nuts, read one. Village has gone screwy, read another. There was even one from the Torrance police who must have been relieved that someone else was chasing Louis. Louis pored over photos of his race in the evening papers. In some he appeared tied with Lash, in others he appeared to be in front. On the track he'd felt he'd win. The top 3 racers would go to Berlin, but Louis had felt cheated nonetheless. As Louis studied the papers, the judges were reviewing photos and film of the 5,000. Later, Louis telegrammed the news home. Judges called it a tie. We'll run harder in Berlin. The Zamperini's house was packed with well-wishers and newsmen. Anthony drank toast until 4 in the morning. Pete walked around in back slaps. Am I ever happy, he wrote to Louis. I have to go around with my shirt open so that I have enough room for my chest. Louis Zamperini was going to compete in the Olympics, in an event he'd run only 4 times. He was the youngest distance runner to ever make the team. And that is him going to Berlin. And then we'll be on chapter 4 tomorrow, which is Friday. So I'll see you then.